Welcome, everybody, to the Success Elevated podcast. As always, I'm your host, Hayden Lee, and I am joined this week by a very special, I'm going to stop calling him a guest because he's really not a guest. He's a co-host for us, Mr. Derek Priest, founding partner here at Spot On Solutions. And Derek is going to be introducing a very special guest for us here on the Success Elevated podcast. But first and foremost, Derek, thanks for coming on and helping me again on episode, gosh, man, I think this is episode 57, 58. We are cruising right along here. So
we are cruising. It is great to be with you again, Hayden. I love being on the podcast with you. I love having these conversations with fantastic guests and really diving into some really, really cool topics. It's a blast for me. So thanks for having me again.
Yeah, no problem.
And is that my cue to take over and introduce?
You go right ahead, Mr. Priest. I'm going to let you introduce our special guest this week.
Well, I got to tell you, I am super excited about this episode and specifically who we've invited, who has graciously accepted the invitation to be a guest on our podcast today. This gentleman has been a major influence in my life. I would call him a dear friend and a wonderful mentor to me. I'll talk a little bit about how I got to know him, how I first met him, but I met him seems like a long time ago.
Yeah.
When I was a brand new struggling business owner, got into this whole cleaning and restoration industry thing, not knowing a clue about what I was doing. I registered to, I think it was in Chicago, Illinois, of all places, in January. It was the coldest I've ever been. But I went to a John Donne Strategies for Success week-long event to learn how to run my business. And the very first day met the gentleman that we've got on our podcast today, Mr. Chuck Violand, who spent the whole day teaching me things about numbers and blew my mind. Things that I probably should have known a long time beforehand. Just hit me like a ton of bricks. And from that day forward, we've built a relationship. We've become friends. I've spent a lot of time under the tutelage. I love that word, the tutelage of Chuck Violand.
I like that.
Chuck, welcome to our podcast today. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm so excited to have you here and to have our listeners learn from your vast knowledge and wisdom. So thanks for coming.
Derek, thanks for having me. It's a thrill to be here. Hayden, thank you also.
Yeah, we're excited to have you, Chuck. This is really the first time I've had an opportunity to sit down and have a conversation with you and dive deep into your knowledge, like Derek's saying. And so this is going to be fun. I'm super excited. Derek, if you don't mind,
try not to disappoint.
Oh yeah. Well, and Derek, if you don't mind, maybe talk a little bit like you had just kind of alluded to, but how you and Chuck first got connected and why, I guess, you first got connected and when you were starting your business.
Well, like I said, it goes back a lot. I don't even know how many years ago it's been now, Chuck, but I know you've been doing what you do for a long, long time. You had years and years with Steve Toburin and John Donne and that relationship. But again, like that day in that room in, again, freezing cold Chicago, Illinois in January changed my life and changed how I do business. And then, we've gone years and years. I mean, you were a pivotal part of when we started Spot On Solutions. I don't know if you remember, but when we were, Katie and Michael and I were considering this whole business venture, your advice and your counsel was the most important thing. So we jumped on a plane.
You guys came here to our office in Ohio.
Yes, we did. From Idaho to Ohio, the two most confusing states when it comes, but Yes, we flew out there, and because that's how important it was for me, and to get your insight and your thoughts. And now we're in our 11th year of
Are you
business
really?
here at Spot On
Yeah.
Solutions, and uh,
Congratulations.
well, thank you. And we do. I owe a great deal of the success and the things that we've done to you. So we've been doing this podcast now for about a year. You've been on my mind, and I've been anxious to invite you to be on this podcast, but I didn't want you to be the first guest because I wanted people to actually know something about our, our podcast. I didn't want you to be, only one viewer. Uh, so now that we have some people that listen to it, that take advantage of the things that we're taught, I'm so glad that you're here, and we really felt like it was
Thank you.
time to bring you on.
I'm thrilled to be here.
So, Hayden, we've got lots of things to talk
yeah.
about. So, give us a quick rundown. I mean, like you said, we could talk a long time about history and about where you've been, but give us a little bit about your background, where you come from, how you started, how and why did you start the whole VMA business and concept and grow it into what it's done today?
I think that I think in a lot of ways I don't know if you want to say failed or stumbled my way into a career that I think I was supposed to end up in. I've owned businesses for over half a century, which is frightening to even say. I mean, good Lord. I've owned food processing companies and nightclubs and contracting companies, and then I owned a cleaning and restoration business. And I leveraged that into doing consulting. First started out teaching people how to sell services, and then it morphed into doing general business consulting. And that was coming up now on 36 years ago. And I did it myself for the first 20 years. And then my family was at a point where the kids didn't need dad there to coach their teams, or they were moving out of the house, going to college. So, it was time to achieve what I thought I was supposed to do. And I expanded the practice. And that was when I hired in Scott Tackett as the first consultant. And we've just grown since then. I've been extremely fortunate to have attracted some very talented people to the organization. And they have been the catalyst really for growing the organization into what it is today. I just try to keep it on the rails.
Yeah. That's awesome. Like, me, we could go off the rails very, very quickly.
Oh, very quickly. Oh, yes.
So I will try very hard to stay on the rails as well too today. So yes, you have we've been fortunate enough. You've invited us into with Violand Management to take part in many of the events and to work with many of your clients. And so I've been, had a back row seat or a side row seat into what's been happening over the last 10, 12 years. Have got to meet a lot of the clients that you work with. Some of those clients have become our clients, and have got to see how they have grown their businesses because of, or due in a large part to the coaching, that you and your team have been able to provide to them, the resources that have been opened up to their companies because of them, or because of Violand Management, the things that you've taught. So it's been, from my seat looking in, has been fantastic on what you've been able to do.
Thank you.
I know that you have become very well known and respected throughout the restoration industry. Very rarely do I talk to somebody who doesn't, who's in the restoration industry, who doesn't know Chuck Violand. But now I know that you kind of kind of your team as you grow are talking to more and more clients, working with more and more home service type industries. Am I right? Like, I know that you have a great relationship with some plumbing companies, some HVAC companies,
Yep.
doing all kinds of stuff like that.
We do. We work primarily in the trades.
Yes.
I mean, the restoration and cleaning industries, naturally, that was the starting point. That was the genesis of who we were working on. But we've been fortunate enough to move beyond that into the other trades. And the issues really are very similar. The financial metrics may be a little bit different, in which case, you can learn financial metrics, but it's typically the people issues, the organizational issues, the entrepreneurial behaviors, really, that determines where a business is going to go.
Yeah, well, you're right, and that's what those entrepreneurial behaviors are a critical piece. And leading into that, and I want to just jump back to one more thing. I think the thing that I will always remember, and again from that very, very, very first encounter, and maybe you can, in a quick little 2 or 3 minute synopsis. When I first met you all those years ago, the topic that you were teaching when it comes to numbers, you related it to boats, to remember you had, the business owner starts out and he's usually in like this little, the size of his boat is him in this little dinghy, right?
Yep.
And you talked a little bit about that, how that grows, what it takes to do that. And then can you really quickly, because that was so impactful to me. Again, it's been, I don't know, that was easily 15 to 18 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
But that has never left my mind. And then I think that would be a great transition into what these behaviors that you were talking about that helps those businesses grow from the little dinghy up to the schooner, up to the yacht, to the ship, right?
Yep. Yeah, actually, the time, it's interesting, Derek. You never really know exactly what's going to resonate with a listener or a reader until you throw it out there. And I have had more people approach me over the years about that whole sailboats metaphor. And I can remember doing it at John Down. That's where I introduced the whole concept. And I can remember going in there before the class started, and I would get flip chart sheets, and I put them on the wall, and I would hand draw the different sailboats. One was
I remember that
sailboat, one was the sailing yacht, and then the tall masted ship. But what it was, it just explained the growth, like you were saying, the growth of a small business from a sailboat where you're sailing around, typically with friends or family, and you've got competition, but everybody's kind of in the same water, sailing around, having a good time, passing beers back and forth kind of thing. And then you decide, okay, it's time to grow the business, or the business grows. And so you move up to a sailing yacht. And when you move on to that sailing yacht, which typically is going to be, and I didn't use specific dollar amounts intentionally, but usually you're in the million to $3 million to $5 million range. The game changes, the competition changes, the seriousness of the business, the complexity of the business, that all changes. And so those changes bring about a difference in the caliber of people you need to attract to your organization. And not that they're better people, just their business acumen is different. And the reasons that they're working typically is different. They're looking for success. They're looking to build careers rather than just make money for groceries. And then, but that also requires an enormous amount of change on the part of the owner, because typically you're not going to attract that caliber of people with the behaviors that you might have had when you were a smaller business.
Sure.
So we have to change as business owners. The people we attract are different, and that changes the complexity of the business. And then if you decide, you don't have to, but if you decide to grow to that tall masted ship, it requires additional shifts, both in our leadership abilities, but also in the way that we lead our company.
Mhm.
You all of a sudden now, when you're on a tall masted ship, you can't see up over the horizon. On the other two boats, you could always see land. So you always knew that you had a safe haven. But when you're on a tall masted ship or it's going to sail the seas, you can't see up over the horizon. So you have got to have a compelling vision of where you're going. And then you've got to be able to sell that vision to the people who are tasked with getting you there. Because you can't sail that size ship on your own. You've got specific departments, people that have specific tasks on there, probably people who are expert in those particular tasks, helping you sail that. So that's what that whole metaphor was about. That was a fun one. I enjoyed that for years. That was a lot
I'll tell you, like I said, that was the first day. First day, Chuck
That's
Violand.
amazing.
I'll never forget that as long as I live. But which is awesome, because ever since then, before I met you and up until this point, you have been teaching those concepts, and you talked about how, you as a business owner have to change.
Oh, yeah.
You have to adapt into the person that can lead those vessels, right, and lead those people. And that, I think, is a fantastic transition or lead in into what you're currently doing right now, or kind of what's gotten you to the point where you're right now, where you're going around the country talking to groups, talking to, at events about these behaviors that successful business owners have to work towards obtaining in order to achieve success, right? And in all of your years of coaching hundreds of clientele, what the things are that you've learned that these successful businesses, the ones that go on, that take it to the next level, kind of where they're going, or those behaviors that they've acquired.
Well, I've had a pretty, I'm sorry, I've had a pretty privileged seat. I mean,
yeah,
in all candor, in that not only am I a business owner, and so I'm living a lot of the things that I write and speak about.
Oh, sure.
But I've also been privileged that people have asked me in to their businesses, very intimate areas of their business, to see their behaviors and how those behaviors are reflected in the business, how they impact the outcome of the business. And so it's when I'm saying it's a privileged seat, I mean it sincerely. It really is.
Yeah, it really is. Well, and these business owners, they trust. I've been doing a lot of reading Chuck Violand material throughout my life, but in preparation for this, it's funny that I have part of your little booklet, The Inner Game of Business, pulled up on my computer, and it's like there's this just large section about trust, right? And how, and that's what I think is awesome in not just you, but the organization you've created, is the amount of trust that these business owners, these organizations, they have in you and your organization. They literally open up, like you said, like the intimate parts of their business to where, and to you, so that you can help them navigate through it and fix those areas where, need to be fixed or whatever. So I love that. So now you've written and you're training on these behaviors, right? You've written this white paper, you're doing this presentation. I love the title that you've given it to it. They're not angels.
No.
So tell us a little bit about how this all came about, and then maybe we can talk about some of these core fundamental behaviors that you've discovered are necessary in life and in business.
Well, as part of the service that we provide our clients, we track numbers pretty closely, as you know.
Oh yeah.
And so, we take a look at when clients are progressing, when they're making progress in their business, and when they're not. And so you can look at it and say, okay, here are the analytical reasons why they're not moving their business forward. But the analysis, in other words, the outcomes, the financial performance always follows behavior. So numbers always follow. Philosophically, that's how we feel here at Violand Management. So if you want to change the numbers or the financial performance or any performance in your business that you're measuring, track the behaviors that led to it. And so we track these numbers all the time. When we finally got to a point where we said, we've got a ton of data here from working a lot of years with a lot of clients. Have we ever really looked into those behaviors that we feel from our experience, and it is experiential, that lead to those clients who are able to sustain growth rather than stall or rather than just limp along year after year in their businesses? And Derek, I think it's important. I think it's important when I talk about this, especially when I call it a study. The study is very limited. I mean, it's limited to our client base, and our client base is very limited, and it's limited to folks in the trades. We don't deal with big businesses. We don't deal with international businesses. We deal with small businesses, again, primarily in the trades. So that's what it's based on. But from that, we worked with our consultants to come up with behaviors that we felt contributed to sustained profitability, not just, okay, we have a great year or a great quarter, but then we go off the rails.
Sure.
We're talking about over the years growing a successful business that is not dependent on the owner being there. That's the critical factor. Otherwise, you just created a job,
right?
And that you can't escape. So it had to be those factors. And it was in that group of clients that we worked with, again, over at that point, 34 years, I think, that we pooled our thoughts, the things that we had, and we come up with, we boiled it down. I boiled it down to 10. Now, obviously, there are a lot more, drive, motivation, attitude, these kind of things. But those are almost like table stakes, just to get in the game.
Yeah.
We looked at other behaviors that we saw repeating themselves that were a little bit more, I'm going to say, difficult to maintain. And so that was what we came up with. And again, that study was limited to our clients.
It's funny, and when we were talking before the podcast, I know, Hayden, you've got some things you specifically want to talk to him about some of these topics, but
oh yeah,
you this is a very limited study, and I guess, from the standpoint of the world, this is your client base is a limited study, but I think for 99.9% of our listeners, it's a pretty vast, your knowledge and the 34 years of experience working with these clients. I would think that that's a big enough pie to pull from to gather enough information that could be critical. So, wow. To me, I think that's a lot deeper than I would probably ever consider going in a study. So I think it's awesome. So you said there's like 10 of these, and I was note, and we're going to go over the majority of ones, and I think they're all super important, but do any of them you feel like, I don't feel like you listed them in any particular order.
That's correct.
Because I don't, as I was going through them, I'm like, I don't know that any one of them is more
I felt the same way, Derek. Like, gosh, this is so crucial, but then this one is as well. Yeah, I'm with you.
So, rather than just, I don't know, Hayden, you tell me, should we list them first and then highlight some of them? Or Chuck, how would you like, or you want to just kind of go off the rails and start talking about some of these behaviors? Because I think we could go on for days with this. So.
Well, how about if I just list them?
Let's do that. I think that's a great call, Chuck.
If you want to talk about.
Yep, Chuck, if you don't mind, go through and then we can pick out ones that we kind of want to highlight maybe. Yeah, but go for it.
Okay. So if you look at the 10 behaviors, we boiled it down to 10 again. The first one was ego management. And again, we can get deeper. I'll get deeper into any of these that you want to talk about, but I'll just go through them. The next one is coachability. And it just, basically that is an owner's willingness to be coached by somebody else, to learn something new. There's introspection, somebody who is introspective, which might seem odd for many small business owners because we don't typically think of them that way. But the ones that we saw were introspective. They paid attention to themselves, their own behaviors. They were also inquisitive. So they were constantly looking for ways, not just to do things faster, smarter, cheaper, but they had an inquiring soul, basically, looking for things. Mm-hmm. There's disciplined execution, and that is a broad range of characteristics that lead to making informed decisions rather than decisions that are just based on their ego or how they're going to feel. There's navigating versus steering. This one is one that's, quite frankly, kind of dear to my heart, because steering has to do with running a business by a plan, through a plan or by numbers. So in other words, you start with a plan. We're going to steer this thing according to the plan. But understand that when you own a small business, there is always somebody crashing something into your front yard. And so you better be ready to navigate around that thing rather than just relying on the plan, because when you wrote that plan, you didn't know that was going to happen. So it has to be somebody who is nimble enough to move around those things, to address those things. There's adaptability. Adaptability has to do with basically doing away with the thinking that, well, it worked last year, or it got me where I am now. Why do I have to go and change things? That's a formula for dying, for becoming a dinosaur. So you have to be adaptive. Then there's perseverance, and perseverance is working through the struggles that come with running any small business, any business in general, but particularly small businesses, because you do get exhausted. You do have self-doubts. You have times when you question whether you're capable of doing it, but it's being able to persevere through those fatigues and doubts. There's grittiness, which is different than perseverance. Grittiness is the eagerness or your willingness to get your hands dirty, to get down and wrestle with issues. As a matter of fact, even enjoying doing that. And then the last one has to do with being present. It has to do with hands-on leadership. And it's admittedly, when you have multiple locations or when your business is much larger, it's difficult to be present in each person's life all the time, but it is possible through the philosophies that you espouse, through the core values that you have, the vision and the mission that you have. So those are the 10 behaviors that I wrote about in this series.
Love it.
That's awesome. And as you can tell, there's no one that's more important than another one.
No,
right? That's what I love.
No, that's what's so great about them. Derek, I want to go in on a few of these. When I was reading through these earlier today and yesterday, Derek, they sound, and they're not exactly the same, right? And I think these ones are a little bit more big picture. But at Spot On Solutions, once a week, there's an automatic message that comes through a Slack channel that goes to our whole team, and it's our value statement. And when I was reading through these behaviors, a lot of them sound very, very similar to our values. And Chuck, just to kind of give you an idea, we have these values that we view here at Spot On Solutions that, it might be hard to contextualize a big picture goal for the year, right? So at Spot On Solutions, we have maybe a revenue goal for 2023, right? It can be hard to contextualize what that looks like on a day-to-day basis. And so these values are things that we know, okay, if every day I am dreaming big, I'm optimistic, right? If I can kind of check mark all of these values on a day-to-day basis, I'm pretty confident that by the end of the year, we're going to have hit our big goals, our revenue goals, right? And so but without going too far into that, but I think these behaviors that you've highlighted, Derek, I don't know if it felt like this for you, but sound very, very similar to kind of those values. And I think every good company, every good business should have these behaviors that they know they need to live by, or have a value statement, right? That like it kind of helps you understand that if I'm living these and doing these things every single day, I'm going to reach my goals. Right. And I don't know, for me, it just kind of, there was some pieces here that I was like, wow, that sounds a lot like our value statement, which is really cool. It means that, we might've gotten, at Spot On Solutions, and you, Chuck, obviously with Violand Management, have gotten kind of to some similar answers without even necessarily having to coordinate. Like you didn't sit down and say, oh, Spot On Solutions, what are their values, right? Like you identified some behaviors from business owners that you've seen that have been very successful.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just kind of cool to me, the coincidence that happens when you've got good businesses that are trying to kind of outline what makes them a good business, right? It's just cool to me that there's similar values kind of across the board.
And see, probably where that would play out, and I'm hypothesizing because I don't know your organization, but what I would see is that whole values and the vision, mission. Derek knows how committed we at Violand Management are to that,
right?
But I would probably pair that with disciplined execution. So simply having big dreams is great. I love it. That's my world. Okay, but then you've got to have the execution piece. Yep. And it's got to be disciplined in order to actually achieve those things that you wrote down that you wanted to achieve.
Yep.
100%. And that in a lot of ways, that's the boring stuff to many of us. Okay. Which is why it's so important to surround yourself with different types of people.
100%. I think while you were saying that, Hayden, I was just laughing because that you had made that observation, and how the thought that came to my mind was, Katie and I have sat in the back of now going on like 12 business planning retreat. I've never heard Chuck talk about those things in my life. It just happened that those types of things would show up in our organization. So
amazing.
No, when I told you that Chuck Violand has played a big influence in my life, that was not a joke. So
you're not joking.
All right. Well, that is awesome. I know that there's one. I'm not going to talk about it because I've got this all wrapped up. But Hayden, you wanted to talk about one specifically.
Yes. There was, and obviously it's the first one listed in your paper. We mentioned earlier, Derek, both you and Chuck said that there's not necessarily one behavior that's more important than the others. And so without putting too much emphasis on it, it just stuck out to me when I read through this. But the first two things that you mentioned in that paper, Chuck, are ego management and coachability. And I think those two are very similar, and there's some pieces there that I think we can go further into. I've noticed that ego management was just, it's not a new concept by any means, but I feel like it's missed a lot in the business world. And I don't know if this is something that maybe just hits a little home personally for me, but having some humility and some willingness to like let other people help you seems like that's missed in the business world. I don't know, maybe you can speak a little bit more to that and why it's such an important thing for a successful business owner. But it just seems like being humble enough to say, I don't know everything is often, at least maybe, on the social media world that we live on today, right? Like everybody's on social media and doing stuff like that. It feels to me that humility and coachability and managing your ego is something that is not promoted as it should be in the business world. Chuck, if you wouldn't mind, maybe talk a little bit more about kind of those, why that's one of the 10 behaviors, ego management and coachability.
That's a great question, Hayden. I would probably the reason it's at the top of the list is because I have found over my career that ego management is probably the most important one. If you're dealing with any human being in any walk of life, and they have an inflated view of themselves, it's difficult to work with that person. I find it difficult, probably because my ego is so large. And I also think that that's one of the reasons I write so much about it, trying to manage my own ego. At the same time, when we're making decisions, and I write about this in that series, when we're making decisions in business based on how we're going to feel or look, which is ego, we're going to get in trouble. And I don't know if I mentioned this in this book, but I've mentioned in other stuff I've written, that when we're doing that, when we're basing decisions on our ego, it's never a question, in my experience, of if we're going to stall or decline. It's just, when is it going to happen? Because it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And you see this in so many cases with owners. And don't just think of it in terms of arrogance. Arrogance is a very unflattering manifestation of ego. It shows up in a lot of really subtle ways. And coachability happens to be one of those subtle ways. In other words, I can come to you with a suggestion, and you may dismiss that suggestion, and it's your prerogative as a client. It's your prerogative, but you may dismiss it as, you don't know what I'm going through. You've never been here. Okay, but maybe some of it is that you're not willing to listen to an outside opinion. And so it can be very subtle. You don't just need to look for the huge manifestations. Actually, it is written. In writing so much about it, I've read several books on the subject, and it is written about, by authors as business oriented as Jim Collins in How the Mighty Fall, or Ryan Holiday in Ego, or Richard Rohr in his book Falling Upward, I think is what it was. Mm-hmm. But seriously, when we aren't able to control that, when we don't recognize it in ourselves, it's very difficult to attract the caliber of people we need in our organizations, because they're going to have egos too.
Right.
And if ours is going to overshadow everybody, we're not going to attract those people that need the ego satisfaction to grow our business. And I'm not necessarily saying that in a negative sense. I don't mean it that way. You have to have some ego, otherwise I don't think you're going to really try for anything.
Yeah, totally.
But it's when it gets in the way that it really becomes an issue. And again, then, as you were alluding to, Hayden, one of the ways that it comes into play is in the coachability piece. And a lot of times, and I hate to say, well, is it going to be accurate? I was going to say as we get older. I'm not even sure that's the case, because I've seen people very young who aren't willing to be coached. But when we stop listening to people, when we stop asking questions, that is, in my estimation, a subtle way that we demonstrate that, okay, I'm done. My ego won't let me learn anymore. It won't let an opposing point of view disrupt my thinking, okay, because my thinking is so correct. And so that's a subtle manifestation of an ego that probably needs some management. And look, I'm not a psychologist, okay? So all I can do is observe, and observing clients. And there have been times when, we don't take every client on that has indicated an interest in working with us. And this is one of the things that we look for. We look for coachability. And if we feel through our conversations with them up front that they're really not ready to be coached, or that their ego isn't going to be able to take a jab or two, and I don't mean disrespectfully, but just challenge them on things, you know what? Let's not get together right now.
Yeah.
Why don't we wait? Yeah. We'll be here. Let's just wait until the timing is right. And then let's revisit it, and perhaps it's a better time to get together. And a lot of times, unfortunately, we don't find honesty about that until we've had an event in our lives. And I'll tell you what, there can be events in your life, and I've had them, where all of a sudden you become very aware of just how fragile you are.
Right.
And in my opinion, we all need that. It's nice when it doesn't have to be tragic.
Do you find, Chuck, the ego management and coachability, those behaviors, or maybe lack of ego management, do you find that comes into play when it comes to hiring? I think that would be, I don't know if it's super relatable maybe, but I feel like there's, and Derek can speak more to this, but we've interviewed a lot of different people that have come on the podcast over the last year, and almost to a person, every single one of them has talked about how they've grown their business has been, I hired somebody to help me, or I elevated my team into a space that we were then able to grow, with as far as revenue goes or whatever, right? Like they were able to, like the moment they decide to hire someone to help them, almost immediately they see growth, right? Or hire the right person, probably is the better thing to say there. I feel like at times that can almost be at odds with this ego management piece, right? Like, oh, I feel like I'm the only one that knows how to do this, how it needs to be done, right? Or I'm the best person for this job. I can't hire that person because they're not going to do it as good as me, right? Or whatever it might be. Do you feel like it's sometimes that can come into conflict? And have you found instances where you've had to kind of maybe coach them to be like, hey, you can hire this person, they're going to be able to do a good job, right? Or does that play into that at all?
No heavens, yes. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a great question to ask too, Aiden. I think many times when a business is younger or smaller, we do have that the ego comes in because we have the fear of hiring somebody that may not be able to do it as well as we do it. So, nobody is as good as I am at this. So why should I even try? But then as our businesses grow, I find it shift. I find it go the other way, where all of a sudden now our ego gets in the way in having us resist hiring people who might be better than us.
Mhm.
And especially as your business gets larger, we don't want that person to come in for, a myriad of reasons. But one of them is, I don't want them showing me up, and I don't want somebody challenging me on these things. And one of the comments that I make to business owners all the time is, if you have managers in your business who aren't challenging you, you've probably got the wrong person there. Or you need to do some serious work on, you need to do some serious introspection, because another one of those behaviors.
Yeah.
Okay. To become aware of that and say, you know what, maybe that's exactly what I need at this point in time. It's scary.
100%.
It is scary.
And you're saying it 100%, but it's not easy. It doesn't need, and it's not an easy thing to do, but it's got to happen, right? Like, you've got to bring in people that at times are better than you at maybe a particular task or a particular set of tasks. Otherwise, your business is just not going to grow how you want it. Yeah.
Correct. At our organization, I don't need more Chuck Violand. What I need are people who will make Chuck Violand better, which means that they're better in some other area, which is exactly what we need in any organization.
Yeah.
There's plenty of me.
I love that.
Well, I can speak to that. I can speak to that specifically. Like, that is a big, that can be a huge hindrance to your growth. Feeling like, I know that I dealt with this on a personal level for a long, long time. Like, feeling like there's just not anybody that can do it the way that I do it. Like, and I don't want it done any other way. And so, because I want it done a certain way and no one else can do it, then I've got to stay in that role. That will be it stymies your growth. It surely does. And when you finally realize, it's like, oh, listen, okay, it's not all about me. Like, there are people that can do a better job. I mean, we can just even see that in the recent past, the Spot On Solutions. Like, Hayden, we've had a history of hiring salespeople that just didn't really pan out very well, right? Which went to prove my point, Chuck, that there's just nobody out there that can do it like the way that I do it. But until recent, and then we have brought on Bryce recently, who, we've been able to who's doing a fantastic job and has proven point, Chuck, that there are people, you got to hire somebody that can do it better than you, and I think I know we've done that in this case, right? And so what has just happened in our business over the last 3 to 4 months, 5 months, has been a significant change when we decided to kind of let that ego go away, right?
That's tough.
Yeah,
it's tough.
It's awesome.
One of the things that a little peek behind the kimono here, behind the curtain at VMA. One of the things that happens, and sometimes this is a little unsettling for new people here, is when we get together as a group, and we do this several times a year. Everybody flies into town for these meetings that we have, and we'll get into occasionally, especially at the business planning one, our own business planning, we'll get into animated conversations. Let's just say it that way. I mean, you've got a lot of A-type personalities in the room, and they are not afraid to voice their opinions, which is what makes them great. But sometimes we don't walk in lockstep. We don't all agree with each other. And so those conversations will get animated. But after the but all respectfully, but after the animation, we all walk away as colleagues, and each one of us has grown, in my opinion, each one of us has grown as a result of that. And the beauty of that is that, in my opinion, again, is that each of us has been able to manage our own egos to allow that conversation to happen and walk away as colleagues, rather than walking away being hurt.
Yeah.
And I think that takes a lot of the ability to manage your behaviors, manage your ego.
Yeah.
Love it so much.
One of the other points, and I think there's two that I really am super interested in hearing your perspective on. A little more deeper, Chuck, is number one, disciplined execution. And I think those two are like, execution without discipline is a whole different story, right? So talk to us a little bit about why this disciplined execution is so important in the behaviors of successful business owners.
And great question, Derek. The disciplined execution in this particular article, our experience has been that it's the execution of whatever you're doing is always on purpose. So you're going towards something. And so I'm going to go back to that whole steering versus navigating. It starts with a plan. So what do we stand for? Values, mission, values, core values, and vision. That's what we stand for. So any execution that we do at any level in our business, whether it's hiring somebody on, whether it's holding somebody accountable or holding ourselves accountable, it always goes back to those documents. And we don't veer from that. The other part of it is that if we put it in writing, then we do expect we hold each other accountable to do our part, however it's entered into that plan, to achieve the things that we wrote down. So it can have to do with hiring. It can have to do with selling or performing our own job. It can have to do with tracking performance, any of those things. That's what that whole disciplined execution piece is.
Right. Staying on the course.
Staying on course. Yeah. The tough part.
Oh yeah. But you've talked about this, and maybe this is going off topic a little bit, but it is important. It's critical to have a plan and to make our decisions based off of that plan. But in business, in life, just like you said, and then this is going to kind of go back towards that steering versus navigating thing. Like there's going to be things that happen that potentially you need to alter the plan just a little bit, right? Those unforeseen things that you've got to navigate around or through, that then could, not that you would necessarily change your overall direction, but you may have to change your plans to get there. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I don't think we have to look any further than 3 years ago. When all of a sudden COVID changed the way that we view things. And what we discovered was that those clients that we work with who had a good plan and who were used to working from a plan, yeah, you're right. I mean, they had to view things differently, come up with different strategies, but they still had the plan. They never abandoned the plan.
Right.
So they were the ones we found that they were the ones who came back faster than the ones who just they didn't have a plan. They weren't used to following a plan. So they just went off, and whatever they thought was going to be expedient at that time. But those who had the plan, they said, okay, you know what? Well, we need to do this a little bit differently, but we still know where we're going.
Yeah.
So that's an example of that.
Kind of like Google Maps. Like when I'm going from point A to point B, I always have my pin where I want to go in one spot, but something's going to happen, right? Like road construction, there's
Yep.
going to be a wreck, and I'm going to get a little notification. Google's going to see, and Google Maps is going to say, if we reroute to this direction, we can still get there. It might take a little bit longer, but we're still going to get there. I may have to change course, but the point never changes. Right?
Correct.
The destination.
Yeah, if the point was worthy in the first place, it's
Yep.
worthy now.
I love that. Excellent.
Awesome. Well, there's some cool points there, Derek. Is there anything else you want to further dive into before I don't want to keep Chuck too long, but is there anything any other pieces there that you want to go a little further into?
Well, let's take another hour and a half because there are tons of things. But, okay, so no, but though on a serious note, though, Chuck, you talked about 10 of these different behaviors, disciplines. We have highlighted just a small handful of them, which I think has been awesome and critical. But these other 10, where would I go to get more information about this, specifically in regards? I know that you share this information, obviously, not only with your clients and people in the industry, but is there a place that, somebody listening to this podcast could go to get more information about this?
Yep. Thank you. Derek, if anybody wants a copy of the white paper, just email us at office@violand.com. Office@Violand, VIOLAND.com. Happy to send it to them.
Awesome. Okay. Awesome. Well, we'll make sure that we put that in the show notes as well too. But tell us a little bit, as we come to the end, and like I said, I could talk to you for a long, long time.
I can't believe that we've got.
I can't believe
this much
we've already
time has
been an hour already. But the one thing that I've loved about you and your organization and the vision that you have for business owners is this whole idea of you're not going to get, what got you here is not going to get you where you want to go. And you've been always very adamant about education and about learning and, how to be better. The thing that I've loved, and I am a graduate and proud of it, but you have the Violand Executive Summit that you and your organization put on every month, which is coming up in the relatively near future. Do you want to speak a little bit about what that is, and then we can? I'd love to invite people to that too, if it's all right with you.
I'd love to invite people to that. What were the dates? We say the 21st to the 23rd, or the 20th to 22nd?
June 21st through the 23rd.
Okay. Yeah, it's once a year that we hold the event in conjunction with Kent State University. And generally we draw a couple hundred people to this thing, a little more. And you're there as a sponsor. Thank you very much. But so it's the whole purpose for this summit. The reason we launched it was to bring leadership and management training to small business owners. We don't deal with technical issues. We deal with leading and managing small businesses. And so each day, it's 2 full days. You pick one course from the courses that we have that year. So you're all day in that one course with that instructor. Our instructors, our faculty come from Kent State University, as well as from several of them we've worked with over the years. Some of them are internationally known speakers. Some of them are nationally known speakers who come in and work on it. The third day this year is a half day that we're calling Spark, SPARK, and it is going to be an opportunity to share ideas to solve issues, challenges that are going on inside your business as a group, and then to share that out to the rest of the people that are in that course. Half day on Friday.
Oh, great. Yeah, that's new. That's awesome.
It is new. Now, we're pretty excited about that.
And so, this is going to be in the great state of Ohio, the metropolis of Canton,
Ohio.
Is that correct?
Home of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, baby.
I love
Pro
it.
Football Hall of Fame. So yeah, encourage anybody who's listening to that, go to violand.com, sign up, check out the Executive Summit happening on June 21st through the 23rd of this year. I've gone for years. I'm a proud Violand Executive Summit graduate. Have my diploma on the wall here behind me, Chuck. Like there's baseball and there's my Chuck Violand diploma up there. So
I love it.
Few things that I hold near and dear: baseball and my diploma from
Thank you.
from Executive Summit. So that again, Chuck, I could go on for days talking to you about this. I encourage anybody that's listening to this, to reach out to Violand, get a copy of this white paper, see Chuck wherever he's at, traveling the world, speaking in one of his engagements.
Come up and say hi.
Come up, say hi. He's a very, very personable and kind, very humble man. Again, I'm super grateful for your friendship. Hayden, as we wrap up, I know you have a tradition here.
Oh yeah.
Podcast. So
we'd miss out on an opportunity if we didn't ask Chuck the same 3 rapid fire questions that we ask everybody that comes on the show. First, foremost, Chuck, thanks again just for coming on. This has been awesome for Derek and I to pick your brain a little bit. And yeah, this has been great. So without keeping too much longer, I want to ask the 3 questions we ask everybody that comes on. First question, favorite book or podcast that you're reading right now or listening to, or maybe that you've read recently, something that you've really enjoyed.
There's a book, and Derek actually kind of alluded to it, that I have felt for years should be required reading for every small business owner. And it's called What Got You Here Won't Get You There, by a guy named Marshall Goldsmith. Goldsmith. If you get a chance, it's an easy read. In my opinion, it gives you guides on how to behave as a business leader. And I would highly recommend that book. What Got You Here Won't Get You There. I'm not a big podcast guy. There's my older son put me onto one that I've been listening to occasionally, but it has nothing to do with business. By a guy named Rich Roll. Rich Roll deals with athletics and with longevity and really a broad range of things. But he's an ultra athlete. So.
That's awesome. Well, very cool.
Yeah.
I know, Derek, that's a book, Derek, that you've recommended to me before. So that's a great recommendation, Chuck. Second question. I'm sure, as obviously a business owner in your past, but also now, like you've had to wear a lot of hats, and days can be long as they are, I'm sure. How do you relax at the end of a long day? What are some things that you do to recharge your mental and emotional batteries?
He's married to Karen Violand. She takes care of his every whim. He has no stress.
No stress at all, right?
She is the nicest lady in the world, I'll tell you. But one of the things that we enjoy doing, my wife and I enjoy doing, quite frankly, is riding bicycles. So we ride bikes. Where we live in Northeast Ohio, there's a very large national park that they have. The canals were big here in the area back in the 1800s. So they don't use canals anymore. And so they don't use the rails there so much anymore. So they've changed the rails into trails. So now you can ride bikes on the trail along the river, along the canal. So we enjoy riding bikes a lot.
I love
especially
it.
in good weather.
I love it.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Fun.
Hopefully you're getting some better weather in the next few weeks, right? For all of us.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yes. Last question, Chuck. But before we have you go, if you could rewind to the beginning of your career with Violand Management, or maybe the beginning of your career owning businesses, whatever you choose. But if you could rewind to the beginning and tell younger Chuck one thing, what would it be?
I thought about this one after Derek mentioned to me.
Okay.
That's one of the questions you were going to ask. And actually, I wrote a book on it. It's called The Inner Game of Business.
I love it.
So I suppose if I was going to give myself some advice, I probably wrote it in that booklet.
That's amazing.
And that was the spirit in which I wrote it, not to myself, but to a younger business owner. So
I love it. Well, and that's a great, that's a great plug then for your book as well. Because at the end of the day, if you can put down some of those notes and give it to other people, it's that
same
much
thing.
easier.
That one's for free. So if they want to just send us a note at office@violand.com, I'm happy to send them a copy of it. PDF.
I love it. That's awesome. Well, Chuck, thank you again from us at Spot On Solutions and the Success Elevated podcast. Thank you for coming on and talking a little bit about today about those 10 behaviors and your career and all that you've learned from helping business owners. Just really appreciate it. And I know Derek appreciates your friendship over the years, and we're just extremely grateful for having you on.
It's been a joy. Thank you very much for inviting me. I really do appreciate it.
Well,
you're awesome.
It's been awesome. And we hope to be honest, we hope to have you on in the future again. I think there's even more we can talk about, whether it's these 10 behaviors or the executive summit. Maybe we could do a recap of the executive summit. I think that'd be a good conversation to have. And yeah, we hope to have you on again in the future. So
I'd love to be here. Thank you very much. Anytime. Let me know.
Thank you. This has been Success Elevated, making you a little bit better one show at a time. Thanks for joining us. Please subscribe on YouTube or any other major podcast platform to listen to more episodes. We are proudly brought to you by Spot On Solutions. If you'd like to learn more about how we can help you grow your business, please check us out at spotonsolutions.com.